1-0 it would finish against Newcastle, who've had their struggles on the road this season. And now Manchester United are into 5th spot in the table, just outside the top 4 level, on points with Chelsea, having played a game more though. That's how things are looking in the table so far. As for Newcastle, they stay there in 11th spot right now. 23 points as it stands at this stage of the season. Let's welcome in Nader Manua and Mark Ogden. Let me start though with you, Stevie Nicol. Not the most thrilling of games, but a win for Manchester United nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a win, and I guess you have to give them credit. They spent the second 45 in particular on the edge of the box, and they kept Newcastle out, and so you have to give them credit for that. At the same time, it's hard not to look at Newcastle and ask yourself how they created very little, how they never really made Lemons do an awful lot. And the final third, basically, the final pass, the final cross, the final ball, the final thought, whatever it was, wasn't there today. And they had plenty of the ball, and they were in that final third, as I said, for pretty much the whole of the 45 minutes, the second half, but could not come up with any real quality in order to create a real opening or put Lemons under pressure. So in the end, good defending from United, but woeful from Newcastle.
Yeah, listen, I agree. I think if you're Newcastle United, you only have yourselves to blame here. In some respects, Manchester United and Amorim almost tried to get them back in the game. But Newcastle were just that poor in front of goal, that poor in the attacking third, that Lemons who has been very good since he signed, but totally comfortable throughout the day. Two plays that I think summed up Newcastle. Despite the 2/3 possession and the dominance in shots and all those attacking statistics, there was one, Anthony Gordon gets the ball down the left-hand side, has Joe Linton top of the box, puts the ball right in the middle of his feet. He can't do anything with it. That summed up, for me, I think Gordon, good on the left-hand side and taking players on, particularly in the second half, and was certainly getting the better of both Dallo and Euro in the second half. But that final ball, Harvey Barnes comes off the bench, as it happens, same time with Johan Wieser. He gets a ball down in the channel down the right-hand side of the box, and has one thing in his mind, to pull the ball back to Gordon, who skies his effort. But as you see the replay, Wieser is standing in acres of room, dead centre, with a tap-in. Had Barnes just raised his head, it was a really simple ball to play. But again, I am a huge Harvey Barnes fan. I think what he brings is simply outstanding. But you see that play and you question whether he even had a look across the face of goal. And that just kind of summed up Newcastle in the attacking third for me, where for all their play, for all their dominance, they just let themselves down. They just, I thought, somehow made the wrong decision every single time.
We don't often see Manchester United, Naden, without Bruno Fernandes. How do you think they did?
Well, I think, to be honest, for the first half, I thought they looked fine, but the second half itself, personally, I think that's one of the worst halves of football I've seen from a side. That, you know, as we see now, they're 5th in the table, potentially pushing to be in Europe, playing at home with 11 players, and they had 24% possession. They had no control of that game whatsoever against the Newcastle side, who, you know, we have this sort of like, in some ways, softness for them because the Newcastle, they've got, you know, St James's Park, they play well, they're in the Champions League, but they've picked up 6 points away from home this whole season so far. So should United really be camped on the edge of their own box in that manner? For me, probably not. Maybe the likes of Bruno Fernandes and others could have made a difference. And also, you know, we can talk about the substitutions that Amorim was making, and I felt like every time he made one, United got worse. They took more of a step backwards, taking off real experienced players at key times in the game, even towards the end, taking off your captain in Martinez and, you know, Luke Shaw, like with literally minutes left to go in the game. It felt really strange, and I think somebody like Bruno Fernandes could have made a difference in there with his experience, and he's having a good season for United. They may be inconsistent, but he himself has been consistent and done well for them. But it was a weird game of football, because as I say, the first half I thought they looked good overall, and then the second half we're asking questions about why Newcastle couldn't score, because United didn't look like they were going to be doing anything else but defending, which if they were down to 10 would be fine, but 11 versus 11 playing like that, I think there was a lot of anxiety in the stadium, you know, people watching their TVs from a Man United perspective.
Yeah, let me come back to Mark in just a moment, but because Naden brought up that substitutions point, I know it's something that you talked about during...
Shaq and I, well, the first one was Euro, And I'm thinking, why is he bringing Euro on? And he does this. He does it every single game. He brings on a centre-back and takes one off. But, as Nahum said, the absolute and utter total head-scratcher, bringing on Malacia, who hasn't kicked a ball for about 18 months, and Fredriksson, who we know nothing about him, and you're taking off two experienced players. I was absolutely dumbfounded. I couldn't begin to try and understand what was in Ruben Amorim's head, because, like Nedum, I don't know what to say. It was completely dumbfounding.
I thought, and even, if not more confusing, at the very least just as confusing decision that Amorim made was to switch Dorgu from the right to the left. I thought Dorgu in the first half was easily the best player on the park. Best player on the park going forward in terms of how much space he was able to find, but because of his running, was able to, somehow get the wrong side of Hall every single time. He had Hall in an absolute twist. And while so much of Newcastle's attacking play goes down that left-hand side with Hall and Gordon, because Dorgu was dropping in and covering with Dalot, Heaven was doing a really good job of covering for Dalot when Dorgu stayed up. I thought for sure Eddie Howe was sitting in the dressing room at half-time trying to figure out what we do with our left-hand side to counter Manchester United's right. And then all of a sudden you come out at second half and Dorgu's playing on the other flank. And nowhere near as effective. Well, as an understatement, he was absolutely absent in the second half. And again, that just added to the confidence, to the confusion for me. And which is why I started by saying Newcastle United only had themselves to blame. Because I thought Manchester United almost did all they could to hand this to Newcastle in so many ways. And it almost feels a little bit weird being this critical of a team that won. But it was just one confusing decision after the next.
Well, I suppose that's what it comes down to, doesn't it, Mark? Whether the boys like it or not, they did still win, Manchester United.
They did, but listen, I'm fully with the guys. It was a very, very strange game. And I just want to throw something to Steve in a minute. But I think, first of all, I think the Mason Mount, I'm assuming it was an injury at half-time. He would surely have not taken Mason Mount off had he been fit. But I think that changed everything, because I think when he went off injured, they didn't know what to do, because Mason Mount was driving a lot of the game for United, and obviously with Bruno missing as well, they missed that kind of creative force as a number 10. But just one thing I want to ask Stevie, having been a manager himself, are there times that you've known, or have you maybe done it yourself, when a manager makes strange selections, strange changes to make a point to the board, or make a point to the director of football, or make a point to somebody, say, this is what I'm working with, so get me some players next month?
No, absolutely not. No, he's trying to figure out how do we see the game out. You know, he's not trying to be clever and think about stuff like that, Augie. He's trying to see the game out, which makes it worse. If that was true, if what you were saying was true, then 100% he's done the right thing. But he's not thinking at that point in time. He's not thinking that. And again, as I said, I don't understand. You know, you can't turn around and say, well, you know, they were tired, and you know they haven't done 90 minutes. You've only got 3 minutes to go. I mean, it's just nonsensical. It makes no sense. But I'd have to say 100% that's a non-starter, Augie, on why he made those decisions.
Do you want to react to that, Augie?
No, I mean, I just think he said a few strange things in the last few days. Listen, Ruben Amorim says a lot of strange things in press conferences. That's why we kind of like him so much. And he said things like there were 75% of things that I'd done differently over the last 12 months had I had my time again. And I do know that he's desperate to get players in January. And I thought the strangest one for me was taking Casemiro off on 60 minutes. He didn't play at Aston Villa because he was suspended, so Casemiro's not played for 2 weeks. And he's taken him off. And he's left with the midfield of Jack Fletcher in his second game and Manuel Ugarte, who, as we know, Manuel Ugarte is not very good. So he's got two midfielders in there, one he doesn't trust and one who's a kid. And it's almost like saying, right, well, when I take Casemiro off, I've got nothing now, so what are you going to do? He really wants midfielders. They've been flirting with Semenyo, but it looks like Semenyo's going to go to City. So for me, it just smacks of Amorim. I think he's trying to be too clever by saying, this is what I'm working with. This is what I've got in midfield, you know, so help me, guys, help me out. And I don't think he's going to get a midfielder in January. I don't think United have got the ability to get the sort of players he wants. They're not going to get an Adam Wharton. They're not going to get an Elliot Anderson. Not in January. So if he is playing with fire, then he's playing with fire. He's going to get burnt because he could have lost the game today because of the substitutions. Whether he made it for that reason or whether he made it to see the game out, I don't see how you take Casemiro off and leave yourself with the midfield two of Fletcher and Agate if you're trying to win the game. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Can you see Oggie's point, Nadem?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. You know, there's obviously the stuff about signings, and that one's a bit more nuanced in some ways. But I think if you look back at the game there, the thing that stands out the most to me is when the board went up and Casemiro was the one to be coming off. Like, he's in shock himself. He's in shock. 70,000 people are in shock. Millions around the world are in shock, thinking, why is Casemiro coming off Lenny Yoro? Like, that's one of the most experienced players in that area. But then it's fair to say from there, every other substitution that happened was also just as head scratching. I think the Xerxes and Sesko one, you know, they're interchangeable. We can say 60 minutes. It is what it is. But again, to take off somebody that experienced in that engine room and to be left with a young player, and as Mark said, like an Ugarte who isn't fancied by Amorim at all if everyone's available, just felt really, really strange. But I suppose in some ways they won the game. They'll try and take the positives, but I think there are a lot of people who left Old Trafford today who'll be very confused about what the manager's trying to do.
What are Newcastle going to be most upset about today, Shaka?
I thought the game was there for the winning. And you have 66% possession or whatever it was, 19 shots or whatever it was, and still Lemons, Hall hit the crossbar, but I can't think of the shots that came in. Everything about Newcastle was just desperately poor throughout. And if you're Eddie Howe, you're wondering how that is, given how good they can be, the personnel, because they're not undermanned, but still, they just desperately underperformed.
Nadem, 11th in the Premier League, Newcastle right now.
It's a strange one because, because people have a sort of soft spot for them in some ways, they're almost not necessarily allowed to struggle at times. But we spoke about this probably a couple of months ago before they were playing Man City. We said, they could win this game, but we need to ask questions about their season. And I think as they leave the field today, they'll be thinking about the fact that they've not scored, they've not created tons of big chances, the fact that Lamans himself hasn't been tested heavily. But this is a running theme. They've got 6 points away from home through this entire season. And this is the side, they're in a Carabao Cup semi-final. They're currently playing in the Champions League. So it's a side that they would hope to be higher up in the table, maybe in the position that United are in. But instead, they're 6 points behind the United side, who they've just battered for 45 minutes in front of their own fans. I think these journeys back at times can be very, very tough when you're not getting the points that you think you should be getting. But I think for Howe and others, real question marks here, because in those last 3 games, I believe, they've lost to United in this way. They blew a lead against Chelsea and they lost in that derby to Sunderland and played really, really poorly. So as every week passes now, this is a bigger and bigger group of games to where, the fans and others around it are going to be quite unhappy.
Well, given the fact that Mark did pull up some of what Ruben Amorim has been saying, and there's plenty to choose from, This is what he had to say before the game. If I could go back to this time a year ago, I would do things so differently. I have learned more in this year as a manager than the other 5 combined. I would do 75% of things different. So that's what we heard from you, Oggie. This was the full quote that we've got from him on that. What's he saying here?
I wish I knew. I mean, listen, if you're reading that, you're thinking that isn't a very good admission from a manager that's been there for 12 months. That's almost like saying, well, I've done 3/4 of things I've done wrong. Now, what is he saying? I think, there's certainly selection issues. He waited too long to make a decision on the goalkeepers. We know that. His system, he's had 12, 13 months with the system, but he's now decided to change. He went back 4 today. I think there's a lot of things. I think he could have been more persistent with the club to get certain players in January and in the summer. I think there's a lot of things that he's done wrong. I can't think of many things that he's done right, to be honest. If I'm being honest with you, I think the Kobe Mainoo situation's a bit strange. He's done a lot of things wrong, and he's admitted it. And there are times when you listen to Ruben Amorim, and it's like he's making a cry for help. It's almost like saying, "I can't handle the job. I'm not up to the job," and he's not helping himself by saying those things. He's either being brutally honest, or he's admitting that he's not up to it.
It does feel as though there's always a little something in each quote he says that does allude to what Mark's saying. Like last time when they were talking about winning the league and he said, I might not be here. There's always something in there from Amorim.
I can't figure him out. I really can't, I mean, look at Nuno. We all knew when Nuno came out, he wanted the sack at Forest. Right? So you can tell and you can figure out by what they're saying, what they're looking for. But you can't tell with this guy. I've got no idea, same as Oggie. How can you turn around and tell your bosses, 3/4 of what I did, I've no idea why I was doing it, and it was clearly the wrong thing. And then you go and look at today, and if there's anybody upstairs who knows anything about football, they will be scratching their head about his substitutions as well. So can we add another 10% on today? So that's 85%. I mean, you can't work him out. You know, I can't work him out. And if you had to push me, I would say he actually doesn't really know what he's doing.
Nadim, what are you laughing at? Can you speak Amarim?
No, I can't speak that at all. I think the way that Stevie's described it today on the show twice, Stevie's been confused by Man United from one aspect from Ruben Amorim and the other side the performance. I think that kind of sums things up. And I think in some ways what I do find to be funny, he said he'd do 75% things differently. I'd love to know what the 25% is that he believes he's done correctly.
Right.
Do you know, more to sort of piggyback on what Mark has said. Because for all we know, it might be all the stuff that we completely disagree with him on. But yeah, for him to come and say those things, this is where he hoped that somebody would be able to have a follow-up question. Well, what exactly do you mean? What exactly do you mean? But instead it's sort of speaking in riddles. You know, you've said this, but you're not going into detail about it. You're not going to say too much. And then you have that level of performance today. And it's so confusing, so mixed. Like, they've won a game of football and we're all confused by it. Confused by what he said before the game, confused about what he's done during the game. And I'm sure after the game as well, he'll say some stuff which will confuse us further. But somehow, they're still fifth in the table. So I suppose this is the way it's going to be United for the foreseeable.
As we go to Air Shaka, he is speaking now. We can't hear what he's saying, but there's probably a few little threads in there for us as well.
Give us a few minutes, and I'm sure we'll have a whole lot more to talk about. Listen, I'm with everybody on this. I am as confused as anybody about Amorim, and I kind of went through a couple of phases myself in reading this quote. And on the one hand, you want to say, well, okay, he's being honest. But then he's the one who insisted on playing a back three, and anybody who questioned that or challenged that, it's like, this is my system, I'm not changing. So you only have yourself to blame. And then I thought, is he just saying that, in saying that in the last 12 months he's learned more than he had in the previous 5 years or whatever it was, is he just saying that, listen, when you all hired me, this job was way too big for me? Is that just his admission at this point? But now, with 12 months under my belt, I'm now growing into what's expected of a Manchester United manager. So is he then saying it was too big back then, but now I'm better prepared, and so I can or should be here for the longer term? It's just, you can take this and just twist it any which way. It's just confusing on so many levels.
Yeah, let me just wrap up this segment and put a bow on it. Mark, I want to put to you the question that I put to Nadim on how they fared without Bruno Fernandes, Manchester United today.
Well, I think before Amorim had his kind of substitution meltdown in the second half, and in the first half, I thought United looked quite good. I thought without Bruno Fernandes, United looked a better team. I thought it made the rest of the players do their jobs properly. I mean, the likes of Dalot and Dorgu played as well as I'd seen them play all season in the first half. I think Mason Mount was fantastic in that 45 minutes. I think Cunha rose a different level today because he had to do more in the absence of Bruno Fernandes. So I think United can be better without Bruno Fernandes because it forces everybody else to do their jobs and step up a level. But there's this kind of strange, he's on a pedestal, Bruno Fernandes. I think Amorim said the other day that he's irreplaceable. Well, that's the wrong thing to say. You don't tell your players this guy's irreplaceable the day before you play a game without him, and they're going to be without him for a month. So I don't see this thing about Bruno Fernandes being, listen, he's a great player, lots of assists, lots of goals, etc. But that's because everything is built to go through him. I think when everyone else has to play a different way and play as a team, they can be better. So, you know, if you're going to ask me, should United sell him in January or in the summer? Well, I keep him in January, but in the summer, if somebody's going to offer you 50, 60 million pounds for him, take the money and invest it in players that will make the team stronger again. And then everybody has to put the shift in, rather than when Bruno plays, everybody takes it in turns to have a day off or let him do all the running. So I think they can be better without Bruno Fernandes.
Agree or disagree? Sell him in the summer, Stevie?
I think you sell him. If you get 60 million for him, you sell him.
60 million only gets you one other player, though. It's not like back in the day you could take 60 million and buy 2 or 3. 60 million is getting you one with some money on top.
But then, if you've got to look at the big picture, you're getting your money back plus some for a guy who's given you so many years of service. You're not getting any younger. You've got to move on eventually. Is he the one that sucks the air out of everybody else that Augie's talking about? I mean, I'm not so sure, but that could be the case. It could be the case where you do move him on, then you replace him with a couple of other bodies, and actually the pieces of the puzzle work better together without him. but that's a stretch. We're trying to come up with that. Nobody's putting any money on that that's going to happen, but that's a possibility.
Well, he's 31. He's been a difference maker in so many games, Shaka. And he's rarely injured and rarely absent from this team.
Best player in that dressing room. That's the issue here. And listen, I get the point that Manchester United needs investment in terms of player personnel. They could probably do with moving on from Bruno Fernandes, not being that heavily focused. But my point remains, 60 million in today's market gets you one other player. It's not like back in the day where it gets you 2 or 3. It gets you one other player and a very big void to fill.
Nedum, you get the final word on Bruno's future.
Yeah, so I remember something that Stevie said, and this was a few years ago, around sort of selling players and so on. I think there was an iconic manager at Liverpool that said it's better to sell a player 1 year too early than a year too late. And I think as I look at Bruno Fernandes at United at this stage, for as good as he is, like the club needs to also start preparing for the future. And it's not to say that 31 years of age he's older or anything like that, but build something, you know, and he shouldn't necessarily be built around somebody who the manager's saying is irreplaceable, who in 4 or 5 years' time might have the same sort of impact. So I think if Bruno Fernandes is close to the peak of his powers and is going to be interested around Europe and so on, probably best to sell him at this stage because this is the most amount of money you'll ever get for him. And maybe he wants to say maybe the club will keep him, but from a business side of things.
Leandro Trossard proved to be the perfect antidote to Arsenal's attacking frustrations, following Mikel Arteta's candid remarks about Victor Gyökeres. Gyökeres may have struggled to truly impress since his summer arrival at Arsenal, but over the weekend, there was finally a glimpse of what he is capable of. More importantly, Trossard showed exactly why he could be the key to unlocking the Swedish striker's full potential during Arsenal's hard-fought 2-1 victory over Wolves at the Emirates Stadium. The 31-year-old winger injected fresh energy into Mikel Arteta's side on Saturday night and helped breathe new life into the Gunners' attack. Shortly after replacing Gabriel Martinelli in the second half, Arsenal found the breakthrough. While Trossard did not directly contribute to either the opening goal or the dramatic stoppage time winner, his influence on the game was undeniable. Trossard took control of proceedings, dictating the tempo and pulling the strings down the left flank. Time and again, he dismantled Wolves' compact defensive setup, releasing Miles Lewis-Skelly into space, picking out Declan Rice on the edge of the box, and crucially, feeding Gyökeres with intelligent, well-timed passes. Operating as a creative hub, the Belgian showcased his playmaking qualities, delivering sharp, purposeful distribution. His introduction completely shifted the momentum of the match, and for the first time in weeks, Arsenal's $64 million striker briefly looked like a genuine threat. Before Trossard's arrival, Gyökeres endured a frustrating and ineffective outing in attack. In fact, the Belgian was the only player to carve out a clear-cut opportunity for the 27-year-old forward, slipping a simple yet incisive ball in behind the Wolves' backline. Gyökeres controlled the pass, beat his defender, and aimed for the far post. Wolves goalkeeper Sam Johnstone was beaten, but the Swedish striker saw his effort agonizingly drift just wide. If Arteta truly wants to get the best out of Gyökeres, then granting Trossard a more prominent role in the starting 11th could be the solution. Speaking to TNT Sports after the win, the Arsenal manager openly addressed the challenges facing his marquee signing. "It's a collaboration between the two," Arteta explained. "He was in some really good positions, but the ball didn't arrive quickly enough, accurately enough, or with the precision a number 9 needs to score. But his commitment and intention were there, and we have to keep pushing." Arteta was equally vocal in defending Gyökeres prior to the match, urging patience with the striker's adaptation to English football. "There was huge expectation because we were signing a proven goal scorer, probably with the best statistics in Europe," Arteta said. "But he's coming into a different league, the most demanding league in the world. What happens if he doesn't score in 5 or 6 games? That was the only question I asked him. How are you going to react if you don't score in 5 or 6 matches? Can you handle that? And what about the next 100 games? That's what people need to see. The sample size is still very small, so leave him alone. Let him do what he does best. Support him, and I'm convinced things will come good. That message from Arteta resonated beyond the Emirates. In the days following the Wolves' victory, the debate around Gyökeres intensified among pundits, supporters, and former players. While some questioned whether Arsenal's record signing is truly suited to the Premier League's pace and physicality, others pointed to the structural issues around him rather than the striker himself. Much of the post-match analysis focused on Arsenal's chance creation and balance in the final third. The Wolves game highlighted a recurring theme this season. Gyökeres often makes the right movements, but the service into dangerous areas has been inconsistent. When Trossard entered the match, that problem briefly disappeared. Arsenal suddenly looked more fluid, more unpredictable, and far better equipped to supply a traditional number 9. Former players speaking on television and radio were quick to note the contrast. With Trossard drifting inside and linking play, Arsenal's attacking shape became more compact, allowing Gyökeres to stay higher up the pitch and occupy central defenders. That, in turn, created space for midfield runners like Rice and Ødegaard to arrive late in the box. It was a glimpse of an attacking formula that Arsenal have rarely sustained this season. The reaction from supporters has been equally divided. While frustration with Gyökeres' goal return remains, there is growing appreciation for his work rate, physical presence, and willingness to press from the front. Many fans now see Trossard as the missing connector, the player who can translate Gyökeres' movement into genuine scoring opportunities. Internally, Arteta faces an important decision. Persisting with a front line that isolates Gyökeres risks damaging the striker's confidence, especially with tougher fixtures on the horizon. At the same time, promoting Trossard to a regular starting role could mean reshuffling wide positions and reducing Martinelli's minutes, a bold call that would not come without consequences. Yet football at the highest level often comes down to chemistry rather than reputation. The Wolves match suggested that Arsenal's most expensive signing may not need drastic changes to his own game, but rather the right supporting cast around him. If Arteta embraces that idea, Gyökeres' slow start could soon be remembered as nothing more than a difficult adjustment period. For now, the pressure remains. Goals will ultimately define Gyökeres' Arsenal career, and patience in North London is never unlimited. But with Trossard offering clarity, creativity, and calm in possession, Arsenal may finally have found the key to unlocking their striker and turning promise into consistent production.